July 11th, 1795. 4 in the morning. The British warship HMS Bacchante is cutting through the water near the Cape of Good Hope. On deck, the watch officer is scanning the horizon. Also aboard, completing his naval training, is Prince George of Wales, the future King George V of England. The watch officer sees a ship. Not a silhouette, not a trick of the fog, a ship under full sail, bathed in a reddish light that seems to come from inside the vessel itself. The prince is woken. The captain is woken. All three men stand on deck and watch as the glowing ship crosses their course 200 yards off the port bow. They try to signal. The ship doesn't respond. It simply passes through the darkness and vanishes, as if it was never there. The official entry in the ship's log for July 11th, 1795 reads as follows. At 4 a.m., the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows, a strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which light the masts, spars and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow. This is not a story passed around in a dockside tavern. This is an official Royal Navy document, signed by multiple officers and a future King of England. Hours later, the sailor who had first spotted the phantom ship fell from the foremast from a height of 70 feet and died instantly on impact. Prince George wrote in his personal diary that he considered the two events connected, and that is exactly where the interesting part begins. Because this ship has been seen for 300 years, always in the same location, always described in the same way. And nobody has been able to explain it yet. To understand why this ship became a legend, you need to understand the place. The Cape of Good Hope is not just a point on a map. It is where the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean collide in a permanent war of currents. The cold Benguela current from Antarctica slams into the warm waters coming down from the north. The result is waves 40 feet high, winds reaching 90 miles per hour, and fog that rolls in within minutes and swallows everything to the horizon. Between 1600 and 1800, the Dutch East India Company lost more than 400 ships in these waters. 2 ships per year for 2 centuries. Each vessel carried between 100 and 150 crew members. More than 60,000 sailors drowned here. Their bodies were never recovered. The ocean kept everything. It was in these same waters that, according to the earliest version of the legend, a ship commanded by Captain Hendrik van der Decken disappeared in 1680 with a crew of 147 men. No wreckage, no bodies, not a single survivor. The company logged the vessel as lost and closed the file. What comes next is where documented history ends and something else begins. And it's worth being clear about that line. According to the legend, 3 months later, another Dutch merchant ship rounding the Cape spotted a vessel sailing directly into the wind. When they drew closer, what they saw stopped them cold. The ship was clearly old, built in a style decades out of date. Her sails hung in tatters, but somehow caught the wind anyway. The hull showed damage consistent with being driven against rocks repeatedly. And standing at the wheel was a figure in a captain's coat, face locked in an expression of fury. They recognized the ship. It was Van der Decken's vessel, the same one that had vanished 3 months earlier. They tried to signal. The phantom ship gave no response. It passed directly through their bow as if built from fog and moonlight. 2 weeks later, another ship reported the exact same encounter. Same location, same details. 3 days after that sighting, that second ship went down. In calm water, no storm, no explanation. That part is legend. But here is what is not legend. 147 people genuinely vanished in these waters and left no trace. That was not an isolated event. It happened with a regularity that terrified every sailor who worked the Cape route. And sailors needed a way to explain why the sea took people and gave nothing back. March 23rd, 1939. Glencairn Beach, just south of Cape Town. Clear sky, calm sea, perfect visibility. More than 60 people on the beach, families with children, couples walking the shore, local fishermen, a professional photographer named J.K. Langley with a camera. At 2 in the afternoon, someone pointed out to sea and shouted. All 60 people turned and saw a square-rigged sailing ship from the 1600s moving through the water 400 yards from shore. Not on the horizon. 400 yards out. Close enough to make out individual planks on the hull, dark and rotting with age. Close enough to see torn sails that somehow held the wind. Close enough to see figures on the deck, translucent like shadows cast on smoke. The ship moved in complete silence. No sound of water against the hull. No creak of timber. No snap of canvas. Nothing. Langley raised his camera and focused his lens. At the exact moment he pressed the shutter, the ship began to dissolve. Not sail away. Not disappear over the horizon. It faded the way morning mist burns off in sunlight. Within 30 seconds, it was gone completely. The Cape Argus newspaper sent reporters to interview witnesses. The descriptions matched with a consistency that was difficult to explain away. An old Dutch merchant vessel. 3 masts. Square-rigged. Moving against the wind with no visible means of propulsion. And that silence, that total, unnatural silence. Maritime experts examined the testimony and concluded that no vessel matching that description could have been in those waters that day. No historical reenactments. No film productions. No reasonable explanation for what more than 60 people witnessed simultaneously in broad daylight. Skeptics point to a phenomenon called Fata Morgana, a superior mirage that occurs when layers of air at different temperatures bend light in unusual ways, making distant objects appear to float or shift position. The Cape of Good Hope is ideal for this. The cold Benguela current meets warm African air, creating the kind of temperature inversions that produce these effects. It explains sudden appearances and disappearances. It explains why the same location keeps generating sightings. But Fata Morgana projects images from 10 to 20 miles away. The HMS Bacchante estimated the distance at 200 yards. The witnesses on Glencairn Beach were 400 yards from the ship. At those distances, a mirage does not produce individual hull planks. It does not produce translucent figures on a deck. And it does not hold steady for 30 seconds in a flat calm under clear sky. Here is what remains when you strip away everything that can be explained. 300 years of sightings, always the same location, always the same description. An old Dutch merchant vessel, torn sails, moving against the wind, complete silence. And almost always, something goes wrong shortly afterward. Not because the ghost ship carries a supernatural curse, but because the waters off the Cape of Good Hope kill things with a regularity that needs no explanation from the supernatural. More than 3,000 documented shipwrecks in those waters. Ships go down there with a statistical consistency that has nothing to do with phantom vessels. The real horror of the Flying Dutchman is not that it exists. The real horror is that it doesn't need to. Those waters are dangerous enough without it. More than 60,000 people died there over 2 centuries. No curses. Just wind, waves, and the decisions of company executives who pushed captains into storms for the sake of cargo and profit. Vanderdecken, if he existed as a real person at all, was not an exception. He was the system, a captain who chose speed over the lives of his crew because the company paid bonuses for fast voyages. His men begged him to turn back. He refused. And the legend did to him what the courts and the laws never did to the men who sent sailors to their deaths for profit. It punished him permanently. It took from him the exact thing he wanted most. He wanted to complete his voyage. Instead, he cannot complete it. Ever, this is not a story about a ghost. It is a story about how human memory turns injustice into myth, because actual justice arrives too rarely and too late. And that is probably why the Flying Dutchman has survived 300 years. Not because people were actually seeing a ghost ship, but because thousands of sailors understood something in their bones. If there is a place on this earth where a ship can disappear without a trace and leave nothing behind, it is the Cape of Good Hope. And when a silhouette appeared in the fog, nobody stopped to ask whether it was real, because every man on that deck already knew. Even if it was only a mirage, the warning was not.